Alright, and the final tool in our After Effects toolbar is the Puppet Pin tool. As you can see, it's like a pin, and we're going to see how we can use this Puppet Pin tool to make a puppet out of a regular image. So let's create a new composition, call it Puppet, and we're going to import, go into Project Panel, see the composition, double click, and in the resource pack, in the Puppet Pin tool folder, you can see that there is an Adobe Illustrator project, which is this orange icon, that you're going to import as, let's do it as footage. Let's just do it as composition, import it. And I'm going to bring this in. So this is what you get. You just have this character and it's pixelated because we brought this down to quarter. Put it to full, you can see it's detailed. Got this from Freepik. I'm going to put it back on quarter so it loads faster. I'm just going to close this puppet composition. There was no need to make a new composition. Right, so in this project, you have a layer for the character and the background layer. What we're going to do using the Puppet Pin tool is to pin down the joints of this character and then make those limbs move. So if I put a joint on the shoulder, I could make her arm move up and down. Sounds really cool, and it is that cool. So hit V on your keyboard, and I'm going to go on the objects layer. Just quickly rename this as, let's call it Puppet. Close the layer. Alright, so on my Puppet layer, I'm going to go on the Puppet Pin tool. Now, if you hold this for a bit longer, instead of clicking hold on it, we have a lot of options. We have the Puppet Position Pin tool, which is the default one that you can see here. We have the Puppet Starch Pin tool. We have the Puppet Bend Pin tool, Puppet Advanced Pin tool, and Puppet Overlap Pin tool. Now, because these are all really detailed tools that you're going to use to make your puppets move, or any character that you have within a scene, I'm just quickly going to go over how we could use these tools to make this character move. So I'm not going to be too detailed on each one, just so it's less confusing. So basically, we're going to start with the default, the Puppet Position Pin tool. Control P or Command P to access it, and you can see the icon is just a pin. Alright, so what happens when we pin a puppet? I'm going to pin right around the wrist. You can see now I have this yellow thing, and under my puppet layer, we have a puppet effect, and we have mesh 1. So mesh is basically these yellow guys, and when I move these guys around, I'm creating animations or movement for my puppet. And whenever you press 1, you're already creating keyframes. So if I go in a few frames, let's go like here, and then I click and drag this guy up, you can see I'm moving this character, and we made 2 keyframes. Play that back. See my character's floating around. But what if I only want the character's arm to move? So if you think of a puppet, a real life puppet, you have a doll, and if you just grab it by the hand like that, it's going to move all by its own. But if you kind of hold down the legs while you move the arm up and down, you're only going to be moving one limb. So that's the same logic. We need to kind of pin down our doll to make sure that the legs stay down there, and then we get to like move the other limbs around without disturbing the rest of the body, just like how any human would move. So instead of creating one pin, we need to create multiple ones. So one on the feet, the other feet, around the hips, the shoulders if you're going to move the arms, basically the major joints. You can also put some at the knee if you're going to kind of bend her. And we're going to put one for the hand. I'm just going to place it there. Now, because we're working with an image and not separate layers, our animation will be a little deformed. And we're going to see how we can do this with like a more detailed project and one for the head. So now if I move in a few frames, you can see that I'm only moving one part of the body. And like we said, because it's a entire, it's a merged image, it's going to kind of disturb the rest. But essentially, this is what we're doing. Let me like put the head down like that. Play this back, it's going to have some weird movement. And that's basically what the puppet pin tool does. You're kind of pinning things down and you're going to move them around and create some cool stuff. So that's the position. Basically, you're creating keyframes for the position just like we would do with any other layer, except it's for one specific shot and it's also paying attention to the rest of the image because I have pinned everything down. And the reason why the hips are moving is because the space between the arm and the leg is just so small that they're kind of merged. And yeah, so using this tool, we're able to do this. And after I go over them, I'm going to tell you how we can do it in a more proper manner. So let's delete the puppet effect or the mesh. I deleted mesh 1. So with the position, you saw we're able to move things around. Click and hold, and then we have some other things. Now, what if throughout your entire animation, you do not want one section to move? For example, if my character is going to kind of wave, I do not want her feet to move at all. That's when I will use the starch pin. So the starch pin will just make sure your chosen point is perfectly still throughout your animation. And like the example I just used, putting it on the feet, you can see it's red instead of yellow. It's going to allow me to keep the balance between the movement. So usually when you're waving your hand, your legs aren't flying around. They're perfectly still unless you like jump or you're walking. So right now we need to use the starch pin to make sure these two stay down at all times. Now if I click and hold to go to puppet position pin tool, maybe put one on the waist. And I'm going to go in a few frames. You can see that, let me try to bend this actually. Right now I'm just making a movement. Let me add some for the knees. Now you can see that the legs are just perfectly still. They're not bending like these guys are. I don't know if you guys can see. Let me get the hand tool. You can see how these guys are kind of smooshed in, but the feet are not. So this would make more sense when we have a complete shape, complete puppet that's separated. But essentially that's what the starch pin does. It pins something down entirely. Let's go over the puppet bend pin tool. And I'm just going to get a proper project or just this guy but with separate layers so things will work a lot better for us and get to see it in a more realistic way. Let me go and get that and I'll be right back. Right, so I went ahead and separated all of the layers, and as you can see, as in what I'm about to show you, it's going to show that if you have separate layers for each of the parts of your character, things are going to work out a lot smoother and you won't have to deal with some squished character. Alright, so let's go back to the puppet position pin tool. You can see I have the separated head, separated chest, hip, left leg, left arm, right arm. And this is in the resource pack. All you have to do is just import it as a composition and then just double click on the composition like we've always done. Alright, so let's say we want to move the arm. Let's choose an arm. That's the right arm. I'm going to go on the right arm. You can see it gets outlined. And the hit edge to move up. Now, if I go on my puppet tool, I'm going to see where the joint would be naturally on a human being, which would be on the elbow. So I'm going to create a point right here. And now if I were to just move this guy, you can see it just moves the arm completely out of frame, which is not what we want. We want the arm to move without losing the space here. So I'll create another point on the wrist, which would be about here. And now if I move in a few frames, you can see I'm like moving the arm left and right. Let's just go in a few more frames and add one for the other side. It's a weird motion. Let's play that back. You can see it goes back and then it gets stretched and then it comes back to the other side. You can see that it's a bit deformed because it gets squished halfway and at some point it gets separated from the elbow, which isn't really natural. So what you can do with the position pin tool, like we saw, not only can you move things, you can see the outline, the yellow outline. If you want to see more of a outline, you can turn on the mesh. And I'm going to create one here. You can see it completely outlines the outside of that layer. This could be helpful to you. I'm going to create another one on the wrist. Notice how as I create more points, that part becomes more complex. And that's basically how it works. So the more pins you add, the less of a movement that layer will have. So if I move this guy, you can see it's really simple. But if I create like multiple points, you can see how little of a movement it has. You can also squish it around and do other things. So try to add the right amount of pins, and a great tip is to just follow the natural joints of that creature. If it's a human, you would know where the joints are, or if it's another animal, it's pretty obvious to know where the joints are. Right, so not only can we move, we can stretch things out, rotate if we want, maybe squish the arm in place, and just do some crazy things. And now I'm going to, let's say, move the arm around. It's like move it here. All the way up. I'm trying not to stretch it. If I play this back, you can see that it gets separated. Let me play that again. The elbow is getting separated. Now this is where the starch tool comes in handy. By adding that starch pin tool, we're going to make sure that the arm does not get separated from the elbow. So I'm going to click and hold and go to Puppet Starch Pin Tool and create a pin right where the elbow would be. So it's red. Go back to the Puppet Position tool on the wrist, move in a few frames, and just move this guy. Oops. Create another one here. And just move this guy. Should have brought this a little lower. But basically, what happens is that you can see this part is not moving at all. You do that in a better manner. I'm going to have to come down a little. Alright. I'm going to hit Control Z. So I'll get my regular pin tool and just pin the areas again. I'm going to go with the starch on top and just recreate one below. And you need to experiment and see how it looks on your layer. Sometimes you have to go back and see if you chose the right position. Now let's move it. Try not to squish the arm again. Up here. Pull it back. You can see how perfectly still the elbow is. And naturally with elbows, they do not kind of pop out when you're trying to wave your arm. So using the starch pin tool, you get to make sure that the joints stay in place no matter what other pins you add. All right, let me undo that. Let's try another part. Let's go on the legs. It's a bit longer and we get to experiment. Control P for the shortcut. Click and hold. So it's the same thing with the legs. It doesn't really matter. So with position, we saw that we're just changing the position of things. We get to stretch, we get to squish, and do all sorts of things. Now let's look at the other tool, which is the Puppet Bend Pin tool. As the name says, you get to bend layers. Let me close this off and find the leg, right leg. Going to make a point on where again the joint would be up here. And I have the mesh turned on, that's why we're seeing this gray thing. So basically this creates a gizmo for us to rotate that layer around that point. So you can see it's like rotating around. And if you move in a few frames, you are creating a cool keyframe. Go back, hit play, you can see it goes up. And basically with the bend tool, you get to bend things. Let's see how bending would work. Go in the beginning. Instead of one, I'm going to make another one down here. Now you can see I've bent the leg. And because we still have that keyframe going up, now you can see I need a starch pin tool because it's dislocated. Just going to delete these pins for a second. Go back from the beginning with the bend tool. One at the top, one at the bottom. And if I rotate it, we can see that, let me like rotate this too. I am bending the knee to this side. And let me create a keyframe. I keep forgetting. Come in a few frames. And bend the knee like so. Let's play that back. But we can still see the leg is getting dislocated. So we need a puppet starch pin tool. Place it around the area where you chose, but make sure it's in the middle and not in the corner. And now you can see that, sorry, that's not it. We made a separate puppet. Let's see. I'm going to move this guy a little down. Let's delete it for a second. I'm going to do this again. Go back here, make a starch pin tool. Click and hold, get the bend, and we're going to make one below it and one where we want it to bend from. Move in a few frames and just kind of bend it. We said we want to make it in front. Get this guy, and these two need to cooperate in order for the leg to bend, or else it wouldn't move at all. And I bent it too much, but you get the idea. You get to bend things with this particular tool. And using the starch tool, you can make sure that it stays in place no matter what. Now let me show this on another leg. Delete mesh one, or just the puppet pins. And let's go on to the left leg. If I were to kind of bend the legs, let's create one here. And then one here. Let's do it maybe here, just in between. And I'm just bending these guys and also this guy at the same time. Now normally you wouldn't do it to this extent, but I'm just trying to show something. And create a starch pin tool over here. You can see that it kind of stops the distortion of that layer before the starch pin. We close that. You saw that we completely squished the leg with the starch pin. It keeps the shape. So let's say if I were to move the feet and the feet is getting squished, I could also use the starch pin to make sure that the size and the shape of the feet stays the same throughout my animation. Delete the puppet pins. Now let's look at the other ones. So far we saw that with the first one, we get to move, stretch, and just do some basic movements. We create a pin here and then move in a few frames. We are already creating keyframes. Open this up. We have the starch pin tool, which ensures that the original layer size and position remains the same. And it's not going to completely stop the movement, but it will limit it a whole lot. Then we have the puppet bend pin tool, which as you saw allows us to rotate and also bend certain parts by adding more than one pin. Then we have the Puppet Advanced Pin Tool, which is basically all of these guys combined. Go on it, let's add something here. You can see it's green. If I'm adding only one, you can see that I'm just rotating things with the gizmo. This is called a gizmo, by the way. Add another one to the feet. You can see it already bent, so it's kind of advanced and it's doing the work for me. Bend it forward. You can see that it just does what any other pin tool was doing. Add one in the center. Oh, and I forgot to mention this little square thing allows you to scale in or out of that section, that point. So be careful with that. Alright, so we saw what the advanced tool is. It's a lot more precise when it comes to moving that layer. And essentially it combines all of these guys to make sure that you have a smooth playback. Or just a smooth animation. Then we have the Puppet Overlap Pin Tool. Basically it ensures that, for example, if I was going to move both legs, or move this leg, it's going to make sure that this leg stays on top of the other at all times. And show it to you guys. Delete this puppet pin for the advanced. I'm going to create regular position pins on this leg and kind of move it this way. And then on the other leg, the right leg, I'm also going to do that. So just create your layers, kind of do something like this. And now I'm going to, using the overlap puppet pin tool, click and hold. I'm going to go on the leg that I want to stay on top. So I believe that was the right leg. I'm going to just click on that like so. And I forgot to create keyframes. I'm gonna undo that. Make sure to create keyframes or else this will not work. Just undoing things by holding down Control and pressing Z. I'm gonna delete these two and start again. Click and hold, Puppet Position Pin Tool, make 2 points. Move in a few frames, and then move it to any direction. Go to the other leg from the beginning. Make another 2 pins. And if this is going right, we have to also do that. So I'm going to go in a few frames and then move this guy somewhere like this, so we can see that the right leg is behind the left leg. And I'm going to go from the beginning, go with the Puppet Overlap Pin Tool. I'm just going to make marks on the right leg. And if you play this back, you can see that this guy goes on top, which you could easily just change the position of the layers. But basically it makes sure that your chosen layer overlaps with the other layers, as in it stays on top of that. Alright, let me just delete the puppet for this and the puppet for that. Hit M to close things off. Let's create a realistic animation for this puppet. Right now we're just seeing how things work. Let's do a quick animation of this. I'm going to zoom in on the head. Let's start from the top. Make this half so we can see some detail. Go in with my position pin tool, click and hold. I'm gonna get this starch pin tool and pin down the neck. I do not want the neck to be shrinking or growing, and also on the eyes. I don't want the eyes to also get squished and stuff. Click and hold, get your position tool, put one on the head and one above the neck. Move in a few frames and just And just try to look for the most natural movement. You don't want to squish her head. And I'm just going to change the position of the head. Just get the move tool. I'll just drag it down a little bit. You may have to do this with your layers. Make sure the joints are like connected so the animation would work smoothly. Then move again. Now you can see it's a really nice. It looks a lot more natural because the neck was way out of the area of the chest. See, we're simply moving the neck and the eyes are not getting squished. And also the neck is not getting squished either. Let's try that without the starch pen tool so you can see the difference. I'll make one down here and one on top. Oops, I didn't delete the stuff. Okay. I'll make another puppet pin on the below the neck and one on the head. Move it a few frames. If I were to just do that, you can see the head is kind of expanding. And I can like squish out the neck. Like so. Move back. You can see it's getting squished as I'm going down. But if I get the starch pin, at some points, you can see that the places I chose are going to stay relevant. You can see the eyes are staying the same and so is the neck. That looks a bit creepy. But basically that's what the starch pin does. Now that we moved the head, let's move to the other parts. And I'm just going to make some more points just to demonstrate the pins better. The more times you spend on it, the better it will turn out. Now let's go to the right arm, which is the next part that I'm going to animate. Just add a pin on the elbow, a starch pin. Move the, get the puppet position tool and just come down a bit. Can't see the wrist. Make one for the wrist, move in a few frames, and just kind of move the arm a bit to the side. Should have moved the pin a little bit further. It's fine, you can do that. So we have like a really small, kind of a minimized effect with the arm. And I'm just going to go back in time, as in go back at the start of my timeline and get the other layers. Let's work with this guy and I'll add a position pin, a starch pin on the elbow because I don't want it to move. Then get a regular position pin, place it next to that, and another one on the wrist so that I can move in a few frames and animate the arm and put it behind her. And like we said, we get to move the layers if we saw that there is maybe a little too much space between the two parts of the joint, so the arm layer and the chest layer. Want to make sure that the movement and the space between the two layers are enough. So when we do add a movement to the arm, the elbow is in place and we don't get like separation movement between the arm and the elbow. Just gonna look at my layers again. And also with any other layers, when you organize them, they're going to appear layered. So you saw that the left arm goes behind the hip. If I simply bring that layer above the hip, it will move on top. So you can just rearrange the layers if you want. And let's quickly look at the layer options. We did animations for the left arm. Let's open this up. Look at what we have here. So if you turn this on, you can maybe change the properties over time. You can see toggle ability of property to change over time. We have the puppets that we just opened up. And the Puppet engine, right now it's on advanced, and we also have legacy. If you switch it, you'll get this warning. Just close that. We also have legacy. We just switched over. Doesn't really matter right now because we finished. And we have on transparent. Then we have outer trace shape. And basically the mesh is what's causing the movement for our puppet. And we have the deform, and these are the pins. If you open each one up, you can see their position over time. These guys didn't really move, but you can see the stopwatch is turned on. Then we have the options. You can change the effect opacity, and the effect is what we just added, the puppet pins. And when you change the effect opacity, you can make the effect fade away or the opposite. We also have the regular movements that we do with any other layer in After Effects. That's the position, the scaling, and all of that. Now you could move your puppets with just these because we have separate layers. Let's demonstrate that. I'm going to delete puppets completely. On left arm, with our knowledge of anchor points and the transform, we know that we can easily move this particular part. It's a bit out of place. I'm going to move it back. And then using the anchor point tool, you can see it's in the center. I'm going to move the anchor point where the joint would be, which would be here. Going back with the selection tool, I'm going to maybe rotate the arm, turn on the stopwatch, and then move in a few frames. Then just rotate the arm to a reasonable spot. Let's go for here. If you play it back, you can see we easily moved our character's arm. Now the difference between these guys and the puppet pin tool is that this is all we could do for each of the layers, and right now the arm is one singular layer. So we cannot add like several anchor points to a flat layer like this. That's why we have the puppet pin tool. So if I wanted the entire arm to move and also the hand to move around the wrist, I would have to revert to this guy because we only have one anchor point. And if I did want to move this guy, I can't unless I use the puppet pin tool. And let's see, what else can we do? You can also make the other parts of her to move around. We can use P for position, which wouldn't look that good because then maybe we can make it go like this. Just testing things out. You can see that the head is rotating because we added the puppet pins. So it's rotating and it's floating away. So depending on what you're doing, you can either use the puppet pin tool or the regular transform options. But I highly recommend that you guys use the puppet pin tool when it comes to characters, because you want to make it look cartoon-like and you want them to move properly. So let me just turn this guy off and this guy too. Just bring it back here. Kind of made a mess here. Drag them where they were. Alright. It's not perfect. But basically that's how the puppet pin tool works. Obviously each one are a lot more useful than what we saw here. In this lesson I just wanted to quickly show you guys the function of each of the puppet pin tools. In further lessons we're going to see how we can use those tools and the knowledge that we gained in this lesson to make movements such as maybe walking, talking, swimming, and just any other random movements that you may want your puppets to do. And we're also going to see how we can prepare a project like so, separate the layers, put them into groups using Photoshop. That's what I like to use. And this is it for this lesson. I will see you guys in the next one.